My name is Kayla Delarme, and this is my persuasive speech on global warming. Global warming exists. Global warming is scary. Now, I've heard all of these before, but where's the immediate evidence? How do we know that our climate is actually changing? Besides, if climate change was a monster, it'd be a slug, and we could surely stop it before it destroys our planet. These seem to be very common beliefs among a lot of Americans. But as a human species, we have to stop living in denial and start living for our future. We've all heard of the greenhouse effect, but what exactly is the greenhouse effect? Well, we all know that our Earth has an atmosphere around it. This acts as a blanket, trapping warm gases and oxygen into our Earth, making it a livable place for us to live. Now, these warm gases, such as CO2, methane, if we didn't have these, we'd be a frozen wasteland, and we would not be able to live on planet Earth. Now, we get carbon dioxide, or CO2, naturally throughout life. When trees die, when animals die, and by burning fossil fuels, CO2 is released into our atmosphere. Svante Arrhenius, a Swedish scientist in 1896, stated, "If we continue to use coal like we do today, then we will see evidence of our climate warming up." In 1896, 500 million tons of coal was being used per year. In 2007, 6,300,000,000 tons per coal was used, and 4,891,000,000 tons of petroleum was used per year. This is not a natural way of releasing CO2 into our atmosphere. And by having this cloud of CO2 around our atmosphere, the sun rays that bring us heat get trapped and cannot escape. Plants have a natural way of converting CO2, however, into oxygen. The sun's rays and the CO2 gets transformed into energy, and oxygen is released as a byproduct. This is a process called photosynthesis. This is a natural way for plants to balance out our CO2 and oxygen levels in the earth. However, there's too much CO2 getting released from coal and petroleum that plants can't possibly keep up. In addition, with a high demand on products like palm kernel oil, acres of forests are being burned or clear-cut to make room for farms. And yes, on these farms are trees and other plants that have been planted, but when trees die, they also release CO2 into our atmosphere. And by clear-cutting and burning massive of acres at a time, all that CO2 is being released at once. And with a tree having a lifespan up to hundreds of years, these farm trees get barren after 20 and are cut down and replanted, releasing even more CO2 into our atmosphere. Now that we know what the greenhouse effect is and what exactly releases CO2 into our atmosphere, what exactly are the effects? Well, in this graph from 1800 to 2000, we see a general upward trend in an increase in global temperature. Since the 1950s, the global temperature has increased by 1 degree Celsius. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but that is faster than a natural climate change has happened in the history of our planet. Now, since our world is heating up, the glaciers have begun to melt. Now, this doesn't seem like much of a problem except for maybe increased sea levels. Well, if you take a white piece of paper and a black piece of paper and put it out in the sun, you would soon realize that the white piece of paper is less warm than the dark piece of paper would be. This is because white surfaces reflect sunlight and heat, and dark surfaces absorb the heat. Well, ice is the most reflective thing on our planet, and as it decreases and more black ocean water is being exposed, it is trapping even more heat into our oceans and in our atmosphere. These glaciers also, when melting, is also releasing CO2 into our atmosphere. When ice freezes on the water, the CO2 from decaying sediment in the water is also frozen in the ice. And when the ice melts, the CO2 is released. Now, melting glaciers and the release of CO2 in the glaciers are both forms of natural climate change, but never in history has this happened so fast. And not only is it the North Pole that is being affected, but the South Pole as well. The University of Washington published a paper stating that the West Antarctic ice sheet has begun to collapse. Now, glaciers move only inches per year and take a really long time to melt. But the West Antarctic ice sheet is a pin that is holding together other glaciers. As this moves farther and farther away from Antarctica, other glaciers will soon dislodge and, float and melt. Not only has it's a pin for other glaciers, but it also has enough ice, when melted, has the potential to rise the sea level 2 feet in the next 200 years. And if more glaciers begin to melt and Antarctica no longer has any ice, the sea level could potentially raise 15 feet. Now, we all know that this is happening, but there's no immediate effects. That's because you're not looking for them. Though maybe not immediately in our lifetime, 200 years is just a speck of time in the universe time. Though we might not have to worry about global change or global warming changing us immediately, it will affect future generations from being able to live the lives that we have gotten. Now, what can we do to change it? We've all heard of recycling, carpooling, and alternative energy, but, I'm just one person. What can I do? If we all had that attitude, then nothing would ever get done. By accepting global warming is happening and changing your lifestyle by recycling, carpooling, not littering, and using alternative energy, we can maybe not stop global warming from happening, but making it happen in a less faster rate. It may be our lives aren't the ones we should be thinking of, and what we really should be focused on is the future generations and the lives of our grandchildren, and what kind of world will they be living in.